The Ideal Storm. How the Impregnable Fortress Fell. Prologue. April 1945. The war in Europe is coming to an end. Berlin still holds, but the outcome is already clear. But in the east, an impregnable fortress stands. Königsberg, the capital of East Prussia, the cradle of the German military machine, the city the Germans believed eternal. 8 centuries of fortifications, 3 defensive lines, 12 massive forts, 100,000 garrison soldiers. Hitler ordered them to fight to the last soldier. The Soviet command allowed several days for the assault. No one believed it was possible, not even their own. But what happened on April 6, 1945, military historians would later call the Ideal Storm. 81 hours that changed everything. How did the Red Army manage to capture Europe's most fortified fortress in just 4 days? Why did Hitler, upon learning of the city's fall, fly into a rage and sentence his own general to death in absentia? And what did Königsberg mean for the Germans and for us? This is not just a story about a military operation. This is a story about how meticulous preparation, military cunning, and unparalleled courage broke the spine of the impregnable bastion of the German spirit. Part 1. The Cradle of the German Spirit. To understand why the fall of Königsberg was a catastrophe for the Germans, you must understand what this city meant to Germany. Founded in 1255 by the Knights of the Teutonic Order, Königsberg was for centuries the center of German expansion to the east. Here, Prussian kings were crowned. Here lived and worked the great philosopher Immanuel Kant, whose ideas about duty and honor became part of the German national character. From here, the unification of German lands once began. For the Nazis, Königsberg was not just a city. Hitler called it the impregnable bastion of the German spirit. 100 kilometers from the city in Rustenburg was the Führer's main headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, where Hitler spent more than 800 days planning the war in the east. East Prussia had been a launching pad for attacks on Russia for centuries. In 1914, the Kaiser's armies tried to crush the Russian Empire from here. In 1941, the invasion of the USSR began from here. For German generals, East Prussia was home, where their estates and families were located. For the Germans, losing Königsberg meant losing everything. It was a symbolic blow from which the Third Reich could never recover, and they were prepared to defend it to the end. By April 1945, not only regular troops had gathered in and around the city, but also crowds of refugees fleeing the advancing Red Army. Women, children, the elderly filled the basements and shelters. The city lived in fear and anticipation. Part 2. The Impregnable Bastion. By April 1945, Königsberg was a true military organism. The city had been transformed into a single fortress. 3 defensive lines encircled it. The first line was the outer line. It ran 10 to 12 kilometers from the center and consisted of 12 large and 3 small forts, built in the 19th century but reinforced with modern fortifications. Each fort was a gigantic structure with brick walls strengthened by a meter-thick layer of concrete. On top, a thick layer of earth absorbed even direct hits from heavy shells. Around them, water-filled moats connected to rivers and lakes. Inside, a garrison of up to 300 men, machine guns, mortars, light artillery, and supplies of food and ammunition for months of autonomous defense. The second line ran along the city's outskirts. Stone buildings were turned into pillboxes. Streets were blocked with barricades. Basements were connected by communication passages. Every block was a fortress. The third line was in the center. Old fortress walls, massive buildings, underground communications. Beneath the ground, warehouses, arsenals, hospitals, even factories operating around the clock. The garrison numbered, according to various sources, between 60 and 100,000 men. These were not only regular troops, but also Volkssturm militia, old men and teenagers mobilized by the commandant's order. Thousands of artillery pieces, mortars, machine guns, and most dangerously, heavy tanks, Tigers and King Tigers, whose armor Soviet anti-tank weapons struggled to penetrate. The fortress commandant, General Otto Lasch, appointed on January 28, 1945, was confident. Königsberg would hold out for months. He reasoned simply, if Sevastopol held for 250 days, Königsberg could do no less. He built a new underground bunker in the city centre, 200 meters from the royal castle. There, underground, rooms were equipped for the commandant, staff, and signalmen. Lasch awaited the siege. Part 3. Mines against concrete. But the Soviet command had no intention of storming Königsberg head-on. Alexander Vasilevsky, the marshal-appointed commander of the Third Belarusian Front, understood that a frontal assault would drown in blood. A unique preparation began. In March 1945, a special model was created near Moscow, an exact replica of Königsberg in scale, with all its forts, streets, and fortifications. A group of 100 people worked on the model: staff officers, artillerymen, pilots, infantrymen, sappers. Each group practiced its tasks separately. Artillerymen learned to suppress specific forts. Assault groups learned to take quarters. Pilots learned to bomb targets without hitting their own troops. Infantry learned to coordinate with tanks and sappers. Vasilevsky demanded that every soldier know not only his own maneuver, but also his neighbours. Every group had to act autonomously, but in a common rhythm. This tactic, the massive use of assault groups, became the key to success. No dense infantry chains under machine gun fire. Instead, hundreds of small detachments, each with its own task: suppress a firing point, block a fort, clear a street. Artillery was brought up for direct fire. Guns up to 203 mm in caliber were placed 200 to 300 meters from their targets. They fired at embrasures, at barricades, at house walls. Shells were not spared. Aviation received orders: bomb not the city in general, but specific targets. The British had already carried out long-range bombing in August 1944, when 189 Lancasters dropped 480 tons of incendiary bombs on Königsberg. The city burned for days. Now the task was to finish what remained. Vasilevsky waited for the right moment, and that moment came on April 6th. Part 4. The first day. Fog and fire. April 6, 1945. About 9 in the morning, Kaliningrad time. A thick fog hung over the city. Planes could not take off, but artillery worked. Veteran Zia Salikov recalled, "There was fog, planes didn't fly, only artillery helped. The artillery worked for 2 hours, then we went into the attack." 2 hours of hell. Thousands of guns pounded German positions. 203 mm shells crushed fort walls. Direct fire artillery knocked out machine gun nests. Mortars covered trenches. At 11 in the morning, the infantry moved forward. The first line of defense, the forts, was supposed to hold for months. Some fell in hours. Assault groups followed their practice scheme. Sappers blocked exits. Artillery fired at embrasures. Infantry cleared the interiors. By evening of the first day, Soviet troops had penetrated the enemy's defense on several fronts. The Germans resisted desperately. Tigers counterattacked. Infantry fought for every house. But the assault group tactic worked. They didn't charge machine guns. They outflanked, blocked, destroyed. The first thousands of soldiers were taken prisoner. but the main battles lay ahead. Part 5. The Sapper's Feat of Mikhail Bulatov. Wars are not made only by generals, they are made by ordinary soldiers. One of them was Senior Sergeant Mikhail Bulatov. He was 20 years old. In April 1945, he, a sapper, was sent on engineering reconnaissance of the Königsberg Prussian highway. The task: find mines and explosives with which the Germans had mined the roads. The Germans opened fire. One soldier was killed, 2 seriously wounded. Bulatov, having hastily bandaged his comrades, decided to continue the mission alone. He walked along the road, risking explosion every second. In one place, the asphalt seemed strange to him, as if it had been cut. Bulatov lifted a piece of the covering and froze. An aviation bomb weighing at least 100 kilograms was buried in the embankment. Electrical wires ran from it. It was a controlled mine. Further on, another one, and another. In total, Bulatov discovered 24 aviation bombs with a total weight of 2.5 tons. Under continuous fire, he neutralized every one. He cut the wires, dug out the detonators. When the operation ended, the command nominated him for the title Hero of the Soviet Union. He received it, and he survived, and lived to the present day. There were thousands like Bulatov, sappers who cleared roads for advancing troops under fire, artillerymen who fired direct shots, infantrymen who took every house. Part 6. The Second Day. Battle for the Forts. April 7th. The second day of the assault. The main battles were for the forts, the outer ring of defense. Take Fort No. 5, named King Friedrich Wilhelm III. It was a massive structure surrounded by a moat 30 meters wide and 5 meters deep. The walls were 3 meters thick, reinforced with concrete. The garrison had 300 soldiers, machine guns, mortars, even 2 artillery pieces. Inside, there were barracks, a hospital, a power plant, food and ammunition for months. The Germans believed Fort 5 could hold out indefinitely. The Soviet command assigned the capture of Fort 5 to the 43rd Army. The plan was classic. First, artillery preparation. Heavy howitzers, including 200 3mm guns, pounded the fort for hours. The ground shook, the concrete cracked. But the fort lived. Then came the assault groups. Sappers under covering fire crossed the moat on improvised rafts and ladders. They placed explosive charges against the walls. The explosions tore holes in the concrete. Through these gaps, infantry rushed inside. The battle underground was hellish. Dark tunnels, narrow passages, sudden bursts of machine gun fire. Grenades exploded in confined spaces. Men fought with knives and rifle butts. The Germans retreated deeper to the lower levels. Meanwhile, another group attacked the fort's rear. They blew up the ventilation shafts, cut off the water supply, blocked the exits. The defenders were trapped. By evening, the garrison commander raised a white flag. 300 German soldiers, including 2 wounded colonels, surrendered. Fort 5 had fallen. But the victory came at a cost. Hundreds of Soviet soldiers lay dead around the moat. Their names are now on a memorial near the fort, which still stands today. Not all forts fell so quickly. Some held out for another day. But by the end of April 7th, the outer ring was broken. The way to the city was open. A German officer later wrote, "We knew every fort, every bunker. We thought they would hold for weeks. They fell in hours. It was not war, it was a natural disaster." Part 7. The third day. Street fighting. April 8th. Soviet troops entered the city. The battle shifted from fields and forts to streets and houses. Königsberg was burning. The British bombing of August 1944 had turned much of the city centre to rubble. Now the rubble became German defensive positions. Every pile of bricks could hide a machine gun. Every cellar could hold a squad. Every window could be a sniper's nest. The Soviet command had prepared for this. Their solution: assault groups. Small units of 8 to 10 men, each with specific roles. Riflemen, machine gunners, sappers, a sniper, a grenade launcher. They move from building to building, covering each other. A typical operation: the group approaches a house. Sappers check for mines. The grenade launcher fires at windows where the enemy is spotted. While the Germans duck, riflemen rush to the entrance. They throw grenades into the rooms. Then they clear the building, room by room. If a building was too strongly defended, they didn't attack head-on. They went around, through backyards, through holes in walls, through sewers. They attacked from unexpected directions. The Germans fought desperately. They knew the war was lost, but they had orders: stand to the last. Many were not regular soldiers, but Volkssturm, old men and boys drafted in the final weeks. They had little training, old rifles, and fanatical beliefs. They died in droves. The tanks helped. Soviet IS-2 heavy tanks moved through the streets, their 122mm guns smashing barricades and firing into buildings where German fire came from. German Tiger tanks counterattacked, and duels erupted in the narrow streets. A tank commander recalled, "We turned a corner and saw a Tiger 50 meters away. He fired first. The shell hit our side, but our armor held. We fired back. His turret flew off. We moved on. There was no time to stop." By evening, the city center was within reach. German defenses were crumbling. Communication with Berlin was cut. General Lasch, in his bunker near the royal castle, realized the end was near. Part 8. The Fourth Day. Surrender. April 9th, 1945. The Fourth Day. Soviet troops stormed the city center. The royal castle, symbol of Prussian power, was under direct assault. General Otto Lasch sat in his bunker, 200 meters from the castle. The bunker was a modern facility, built in 1945 specifically to protect the command. It had thick concrete walls, its own power supply, communication lines, but the lines to Berlin were dead. Reports came in. The front was broken. Soviet tanks were approaching the city center. Ammunition was running out. Hospitals overflowed with wounded. Soldiers were deserting, trying to escape west. Lasch had a choice: obey Hitler's order, fight to the last soldier, or surrender and save thousands of lives. He later wrote in his memoirs, "I saw the faces of my officers. They were young, they had families. I knew the war was lost. For what should they die? For a madman's dream?" At 6 in the evening, he ordered a white flag raised from the bunker. Soviet officers arrived for negotiations. Lasch signed the act of surrender. By late evening, organized resistance ceased. Over 70,000 German soldiers and officers laid down their arms. They marched into captivity, past the ruins of their once glorious city. When Hitler heard the news in Berlin, he flew into a rage. He declared Lasch a traitor and sentenced him to death in absentia. Lasch's family was arrested, but the war ended 3 weeks later and they survived. The bunker still exists in Kaliningrad. Today, it is a museum. Visitors can walk through the same rooms where Lasch made his decision. They see the maps, the telephones, the furniture, and they remember. Part 9. The Price of Victory. The assault on Königsberg lasted 4 days. Soviet losses: 3,700 killed, about 15,000 wounded. German losses: over 30,000 killed, 70,000 captured. The city itself was destroyed. But behind these numbers are human stories. Maria Ivanovna was a nurse. She recalled, "We worked day and night. The wounded kept coming. Some had no arms, no legs. We gave them water, bandaged them, tried to comfort them. One young soldier kept asking for his mother. He died at dawn. He was 19. Ivan Petrov was a sapper. He survived the war. He later said, "I still dream about that city, the fires, the explosions, the smell. I wake up sweating. My wife says I scream in my sleep. I can't help it." German civilians who remained in the city faced a harsh fate. Many had fled before the assault, but some stayed. They huddled in cellars during the bombing, emerged to find their homes gone. Food was scarce, disease spread. Soviet soldiers, themselves exhausted and angry, sometimes took revenge. But there were also acts of humanity. Soldiers shared their rations with German children. A medic treated a wounded German woman. A commander stopped his men from looting. After the surrender, the city slowly returned to life. Rubble was cleared, streets were repaired. The first post-war winter was brutal, but people survived. In 1946, Königsberg was renamed Kaliningrad. The German population was expelled. New settlers arrived from Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. They built a new city on the ruins of the old. Part 10. The Legacy of the Ideal Storm. Why do military historians call the Königsberg assault the ideal storm? First, because of the preparation. The mock-up, the rehearsals, the coordination of different arms. Vasilevsky proved that careful planning saves lives. Second, because of the tactics. Assault groups, not mass waves. Flexibility, initiative, adaptability. Lessons that are still taught in military academies. Third, because of the soldiers. Their courage, their endurance, their willingness to die for each other. No plan works without men who carry it out. Fourth, because of the result. A fortress considered impregnable fell in 4 days. The psychological impact on Germany was immense. If Königsberg could fall, nothing could stand. Today, Kaliningrad is a Russian region separated from the mainland. It is a military outpost, an economic hub, a tourist destination. The ruins are gone. New buildings rise. But the memory remains. On the road from Kaliningrad to the coast, there is a monument to the sappers. It is a simple stone, with a plaque listing the names of those who died clearing mines after the war. They kept dying even after the fighting stopped. In the center of the city, there is a mass grave. Thousands of soldiers are buried there. Every year on May 9th, people come with flowers. Veterans, children, grandchildren. They remember. The ideal storm is a lesson in what humans can achieve when they work together, when they prepare, when they care for each other. But it is also a reminder of the cost of war, the cost of victory. As one veteran said, "We did what we had to do. We are proud, but we never forgot. We never will." The guns are silent now. The city is at peace. The story of the ideal storm lives on.